Moche Tonga. There always was the big sky that went on forever till blue turned to green at the horizon, the big horizon where the sun rose and set and the trees grew from. Under the big sky lived the people, the animals, all swimming, flying, crawling, and growing things. The big sky sheltered them and fed them with cool rains and seeds carried on its winds. The people lived with whisperings and thunderings of the sky as the voices of kin speaking in their dreams. That's how it was. Big Horsewoman lived then. Round the winter fire, her story rolls off the tongues of elders, melts into the hearts of children. Hers, a journey the storytellers remember, and so they start. Big Horsewoman, Shangetanga Wa'u. Certain trees, certain animals, certain birds, certain clouds are yours to keep, those you are born by. The willow, the horse, the ears-up dog are my kind. I keep the ermine at my waist, morning rain at my fingertips. Willow talks to me, soothing. There is no sadder tree, no better trunk to cry on. Her roots deep in sandy water, she drinks up tears and they flow through her. So it always was with me. Tihenikewin, water willow. I thought myself one of them, being so named Willow from birth, and I was the willow for my people. If I had not been born there then, under that tree, those stars, only Spirit knows I would never have been able to bend to the times that were coming. So I was, born under a twin black willow tree on the west bank of the Nishide. The sky was full of shooting stars, showering in every direction, so they say. Yes, I saw them, the changing stars that saw my way to earth, and I would say that birth is very much like seeing stars. It was for me. I landed among the people at the beginning of cold weather on a cold, snow-covered night. Tihenikewin, they named me. Water willow, I was called. You would have thought they'd name me for the stars, but the stars are sacred, magic, hube. They, the stars, our ancestors, our babies, our unborn. No, grandmother gave me the name of the tree, and the tree gave me its voice. Seed carrier, Wamide Aling. Her mother held her, touched her lips with sacred water, nursed her, welcomed her. Her grandmother named her. In the early days, every woman carried seed for their families, for their village, for the tribe, but not every woman knew the seeds to carry of medicine. Those that did carried these seeds wherever they went. Rainwalking was such a seed carrier. Najim Mondin carried the seed of every medicine that crossed their path. When her daughter, Kandahiwin, gave birth, there and then, Najim Mondin recognized water willow as one. Rainwalking had the seeds of knowing to pass on, and she saw that water willow was fertile ground. She saw in this new child the heart and hands to carry seeds. She whispered to her new granddaughter, Witushpa, for every medicine there is a plant. For every plant there is a seed. For every people a seed carrier. And thus she blessed her. On this journey I'm going to take you, we're going to skip through a lot, but ultimately she loses a large portion of her family to smallpox. And she has it herself, but she survives. And this is called Funeral Pyre. Pede Wateke. Water Willow saw her father mouth agape like a grounded fish. her mother's body wrapped around her little brother, cradle board dangling from her charred arms. She saw the flames eat their bodies like sticks of tinder. She smelled their burning flesh and stinking hair. The smell of funeral fires is what woke her, floating. She saw the dead inside their homes, weapons, clothes, their sacred things. Tobacco and medicine bundles went up in great clouds of smoke. They burned the dead and all they touched. Mourning cries, a ceaseless wailing rose with the flames, piercing. Dogs howled and roamed the camp, rib hungry. Those remaining standing moved on. Water Willow saw ears up, skinny, dragging few possessions on a small travois alongside her. She saw herself, a swaddled sack bundled down there, packed onto travois, dragged by red pony. So alone, Nanji Manlin carried them all on the trail away. Nanji Manlin did all she could to remain standing. Water Willow's dreaming eyes shut tight. Along the trail away, grandmother fed her teas of sage and cedar, rubbed wild onions into her feet, poured coneflower concoctions and bee balm into her parched throat, thrashed her more with stinging nettie to bring the blood rushing, to keep her skin. She felt none of it, tasted nothing, saw no time passing, merely saw her body there, grandmother tending it, remembered, dreaming. Great crowds, faces empty, but for black hole mouths gasping, walking, crawling, writhing, as if air was water, could not satisfy their breath, faceless mouths sucking air, dry, hot and burning, hissing, grappling with each other, faces drowning in fire that turned to red water, deep swallowing water. She decided she could not breathe, but she could swim up for air. She could swim this wide water back to her people, tuck her arms as waves pulled under, rolling wheels churned all around her, scraping sand against burning skin until something in the dark pulled her out and squeezed breath into her. Water Willow woke in the new camp, not knowing how she got there, not remembering anything but fear and fire and water, not remembering crowds drowning, wheels turning, her people dying, and here she was, still alive. Sacred Hube. When her belly grew hungry, voices gave direction. When lost, voices guided her. She felt something, and voices told what was coming. Her head was filled from waking to waking. This was not magic, yet the people called it such. Hube, they called her. She remembered the day her cousin asked, "What do your voices sound like?" Young Elk, her father's brother's son, grew fast, like a weed beside her, and looked up to her. She asked in return, "What do your own voices sound like, Ekide? How do you know it is yours and not someone else's? Is it ever someone you love or who angers you, someone who spoke long ago, echoing around? Do you hear their voices clearly? Or does it sound like some whisper from far, muffled in the bushes, scratching at you from some distance, pulling from a dream, half remembered? Enfant Shinga, what do your voices sound like?" Yes, she heard voices, but could not know how they were different. Most people knew to just let her alone so she could listen. When she comes of age, she's sent on a quest and following dreams that she's communicated to her elders. She's sent to the confluence of the Niobrara and Missouri rivers where she's digging for roots, and she finds a drowning colt in a flash flood of the Missouri River. And this is after she's managed to pull them both out of the river. Drowning colt, Shangejinga Ushpe. She watched it sneeze into the grass, wobble to one side and fall over. The pony lay there, tangled up in itself, panting hard. She could count every one of its long ribs heaving so high up on its chest that at first she thought it deformed, malnourished. It turned to her, trembling as she approached, liquid black eyes like the river at night and thick eyelashes beaded with water. He blinked, snorted at her, but did not make another move. He just lay there, staring, breathing with those funny, heaving ribs. Water Willow made herself small and moved in closer. Squatting, she licked the palm of her hands and put them out to ride the current of air that flowed to the pony's nostrils, moving her wrists in a soft wave like a bird on the wing. The pony watched her intently, braced and ready to flee. She whispered soft, made soothing sounds with her tongue, breathed a song to the strange little pony, and kept on singing until he was familiar with her smell, her face, her voice. As he relaxed, exhausted, she slowly crept closer, and when within reach, she lay down on the bank beside him, stroked his neck, sang him to sleep. Water Willow tied knots into a hide strip to make a quick halter. She hummed into his velvety ears and blew warm air at his soaked face. She wrapped her arm round his neck and scratched his jaw, deftly slipping the halter over his nose. This horse had been handled before. It seemed all familiar. But when she finally touched his muzzle, felt its new velvet softness, she knew this horse was, in fact, just a baby, just a colt, but a very large colt. "Little big horse," she said, "you owe me your life." Big Horsewoman, Shange Tonga Wa'u. The colt ran with other yearlings, bit their rumps and necks, bullied his way to claim the best grazing. The horses that her people rode and traded were sturdy, strong, and quick. He was chased off by older mares, colts, and stallions until he matured. He learned horse manners from the Ponca herd. As the little horse grew, they became strong allies. Water Willow walked by his side for many seasons before she would ride him. Even as tall as he was, she could tell he was too young. He grew strong and carried her baskets and bundles, dragged her buffalo skin house on her lodge pole travois. She taught him manners at every chance, and his natural docility surprised everyone. Even when he towered above the withers of the tallest stallions, his legs were still forming bone and lengthening out. He was awkward, and his rear flank sloped upward to a high, square rump. She waited for him to stop growing and balance out. Eventually, a superbly balanced body of immense and perfect proportion overcame his fledgling awkwardness. The people watched as the little horse grew beyond any they had ever seen. One well-aimed hoof could crush a man's skull. They again concluded that this granddaughter was acquainted with great powers and had truly found her spirit's medicine. When he was no longer a colt, she called him Big Horse, and the people now called her Big Horse Woman. Shange Tonga Wa'u. We're skipping a whole bunch here, but there's a battle between different tribes over stolen horses. And as a result of this, she loses her grandmother, which is her last living relation. And this is when she discovers her morning song. What e tong wa'ong. As they got closer, Ears Up cried in a low, mournful whimper as soft winds swept past. Something was dead. She could see now the gathering of vultures that roosted in the dead cottonwood, their wings spread, outstretched to dry in the morning sun, now stretching their necks to see who was approaching. She followed along the cottonwood cover of the riverbank into brush and shadows. She followed the hills of corn and saw that sprouts had been systematically pulled as far as hurried hands could get. As she passed around the outskirts of the fields and watched for clues, her heart jumped to her throat. She saw that all fires had long gone out but for the wisp of smoke that rose from grandmother's field kitchen. Ears Up trotted ahead and found grandmother. He licked the blood and nudged the hands that had always thrown him scraps and bones. He whimpered to her cold hands, hung his tail between his legs, and howled. Big Horse Woman saw grandmother, slid off Big Horse. The red blood had already browned against her skin. There was nothing great in this. There was nothing brave in this. And why? Why had she no premonition of this? If she had known, could she have stopped this? The only voice that answered was her own high, wailing scream of her soul. Dream, Hamde. The root smell sifted into her nostrils and filtered into her dreams. And she saw the wood-walking Jean Martin, the wagon. Muffled voices hushed each other, a massive wagon hull on rolling wheels floating over prairie grass, strange faces devoid of blood or color, faces shrouded, skin stretched over boned cheeks, dust-covered lips clenched. The voices stopped. A young girl, blue eyes catching the sky, watching up, a shadow grow against the blue, listening up to screech high, piercing of a hunting hawk, watching the hawk dive down swift, brought Big Horse Woman hurtling fast back to earth. And then in this last scene is where she comes upon the ridge and sees the other woman. Blue dawn, en passant, tihetu. Light came up, standing at the edge of woods. Big Horse Woman watched over the horizon. Her eyes and heart slowly drank in the beautiful bowl of the hidden valley below her. Big Horse Woman spoke softly. I will never forget this beauty. Like the stars above and the creek below, there are patterns in everything. I sit here, not dreaming, yet thinking I must be. Blue and green meadows measured across the horizon in wide, curving stripes. Patches of brambling bush were already covered with walls of berry blossoms, waking up the pollinators. Birds plucked their fill of insects and worms. Accustomed to the abundance in these fields, they thrived and crooned. Songbirds, crows, and jays, birds of color she seldom saw, the air filled with their music and morning calls. A loud bird crowed above it all as the sun cracked brightly over the east horizon. Ears Up growled. Big Horse Woman held Ears Up close, wishing she could walk among the flowing patterns in the fields below, that she could smell and touch and taste these gardens, but she knew she would first explore from a distance with keen eyes, slow, careful, wary. She watched the rising vapors of melting dew frail to the soft southern wind. She smelled flowers opening, scents carried to the hills. She hadn't expected such perfumes for another moon. There were spiral gardens planted in a wheel pattern. In the east, yellow buds spilled down to the creek. A bright white blossom fringed the spiral south. Deep blue trumpeted as it spiraled west, and red marched boldly, a carpet spiraling north. She did not recognize many plants, and this was the strangest surprise. She wondered if somehow she had lost days in her fasting, sleeping, mourning, dreaming. Dawn, taktishinga, actually it's called sky fawn, dawn, manche taktishinga. Big Horse swept his tail furiously, snorting and stomping with impatience and frustration, demanding, "Enough, enough, it's time to go." Ears up followed, grinning, tail wagging. She gathered her blanket neatly around her, pulled up her downy cattail collar, let her charms loose to hang freely. She balanced the burl bowl on her hip and gathered the lead line in hand. She led Big Horse to a boulder mount and swung herself up onto his wide back. She held him, standing. On the hilltop, she voiced their names loud and clear to all that could hear her. Ijaje, wiwitate, shangetonga wa'u, shangetonga, nita anojin. Big Horse stomped the ground, making certain that their arrival had been properly announced. With a pinch of corn powder, she circled her arms sunwise round her head and gave her thanks, breathed her morning prayer. Shangetonga wa'u walks with you. All she knows she gives away, to be empty again, to hear, to each new voice, to listen, to each new way of living. Let me see and know that nothing but good may pass between us, nothing but truth may cross our lips. To you, little sister, Shangetonga wa'u now raises her voice. Wind carried the corn prayer. Powder floated, sprinkling over Big Horse and to the grass. A soft southern breeze nudged at her like a hungry fawn. She rolled her hips, gently squeezed her thighs, and walked Big Horse forward. Thank you. And this is Big Horse Woman, and a big part of the whole journey for me has been illustrating the story as well, and Lacey's tending a table over there with some of my art prints if anyone is interested. And if you're interested in the stories, there's an email list for sign up also. And to all the friends who came out to see us tonight, thank you.